Hi everyone, I'm Robert Moody. I am the principal conductor of the Memphis Symphony Orchestra, and I am chatting with you right now about our March Masterworks concert here at the MSO. This is going to be a phenomenal concert, and some of the greatest music that people know and love when it comes to hearing an orchestra play, paired with some incredible new music, music by a composer that is taking the orchestral world in a completely new and exciting direction, one of the most prominent composers in the world today, Mason Bates. The concert opens with music of a British composer who passed away not that terribly long ago, just back in the 1980s, Benjamin Britten. Benjamin Britten, one of the greatest English composers ever to have lived. He wrote music for Peter Grimes and Albert Herring, and he wrote his incredible War Requiem. He also wrote a fantastic piece called A Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra. It has another name. It's also called Variations on a Theme by Purcell, another fantastic English composer from a very different era. He takes this theme of Purcell and he uses it to introduce the listener to the entire orchestra. Now, this piece can actually be done on education concerts and concerts filled with a concert hall full of school children, and in that form, a narrator joins. We will not be using a narrator, but you will still get the grand tour of an orchestra in this piece. This is one of my favorite pieces to conduct, especially when it comes to the finale of this work. At the end, a portion of the orchestra is playing the Purcell theme in a nice, stately duple meter, and the rest of the orchestra is playing a very fast theme in a triple meter. So for people who like sort of the mathematics of music, it's quite enjoyable, and as a conductor, and I like the math of music, this sort of feeling of a 3 fast waltz against a 2 march is really pretty fantastic. You'll see it's just a bombastic ending, and one that often brings everyone, the crowd and all of us, to our feet in enthusiastic response for the music. After we play the Benjamin Britten, we're going to play 2 works by Mason Bates. It's important now that I tell you who Mason Bates is. Mason Bates is the composer in residence for the Kennedy Center. He's the first ever named composer in residence for the Kennedy Center. Prior to this, he was for 5 years the composer in residence for the Chicago Symphony. He has a number of recordings that Riccardo Muti has done with the Chicago Symphony of Mason's work, which are available for commercial release. He has been the winner of the Prix de Rome, the Prix de Berlin, the Morton Gould Prize, the ASCAP Prize, the Aaron Copland Prize. He won the Heinz Arts and Humanities Award. A recent survey showed that second only to the composer John Adams, Mason Bates is the most programmed living composer today. Mason Bates also is one of my very closest friends. I was a groomsman in his wedding a number of years ago. We met when he was 16 years old. I was 26 years old. I was working at the Brevard Music Center as one of the conductors, and he, as a young pianist, had to sing in my chorus. He was in the Brevard Festival chorus. He came to me one day and he said he was starting to be a composer. He had written a choral work. Would I take a look at this work and tell him what I thought? I looked at the work, and it was obvious to anyone who saw this piece that we were looking at a work of genius. So I actually got a group of singers to perform the work. I took the recording back to an orchestra where I was working in Indiana, and based upon that recording, we decided to commission Mason's first orchestral work. So I'm very proud, after I've told you the history and the biography of this phenomenal composer, to have had such a role in his early life as a composer. Mason Bates, in addition to being the world-class composer that he is, also has a moonlighting job. You see, he has for many, many years moonlighted as a DJ, and he's very interested in how the music sort of from the club world, something that he often refers to as lounge trip-hop, how that music can become part of the sound palette of an orchestra. We are going to perform 2 works of Mason Bates. The first one is his cello concerto, and this is a very standard orchestration, not too many extra bells and whistles, if you will. He wrote this piece for Joshua Roman. Josh Roman is coming to play the piece. Josh is one of the most prominent cello performing artists today. At the very young age of 20 years old, he won the job of principal cello of the Seattle Symphony, and after being there for a few years, decided to embark upon a concerto career. There's a great connection with Josh Roman and Memphis as well. For a time, he lived in this area as a teenager, and during that time, he played cello in the Memphis Youth Orchestra. So it's nice to bring back someone who formed a big part of their career here, who's now one of the great cellists. In fact, the last time I met Josh, he was traveling with the great cellist Yo-Yo Ma. After intermission, we perform another work of Mason Bates. This is a piece that really put Mason on the map. It's called Mothership. Mason wrote this piece, which was premiered at the Sydney Opera House in Australia by the YouTube Symphony. If you go onto YouTube and look up YouTube Symphony, you will very quickly find a recording of this work. And this is where Mason's DJ life comes into his orchestral composition life. As you come to the concert, you will see the orchestra in standard position. Look back in the percussion section, and there with the percussionist you will see Mason with a laptop and a drum pad and some other electronic devices. You will also see speakers around the orchestra, and Mason creates electronic ambient sounds that merge in with the orchestra, and he does this in a masterful way. It does not sound like you are in a club, but it sounds like more colors have been added to an orchestra. Just as a horn or an oboe or a viola give a certain color to the orchestra, so too these new, very interesting electronic sounds add additional color. I think you're going to just be blown away by this piece. And if you have an interest in how modern culture is affecting live orchestral music, well, nobody does it better than Mason Bates. So if all of that were not enough, the great work by BRITTEN, Cello Concerto of Mason Bates, Mothership of Mason Bates, we're actually ending with perhaps the most triumphant work that has ever been written, The Pines of Rome by Ottorino Respighi. Respighi, a great Italian composer who lived late 19th through much of the early 20th century, and he wrote this piece, The Pines of Rome, to be demonstrative of the areas around Rome. Some of it is very much like a street parade at the very beginning. Some of it is very pastoral. In fact, in the way that Mason Bates adds electronic sounds, Respighi actually added one interesting sound. During this pastoral section, he asked for a recording of birdsong to be played while the orchestra is playing some beautiful chords. So you will hear the sounds of a bird sort of chirping wonderfully above the orchestra. It takes us finally to the Pines of the Appian Way, the finale of this piece, and this is a piece that you simply must hear and experience live. It has, as we have done earlier this year, a group of brass who stand in the balcony. It has a mammoth organ that joins the orchestra, and this sound of maybe the great Roman army marching down the Appian Way and coming into view in this sort of triumphant march of victory builds and builds to one of the most powerful endings to any piece that I have ever heard in my life. This is really an especially cool concert. I don't know of any better way to describe it to you. You get to meet the music of these composers, some of the legendary composers, Benjamin Britten, Respighi, and now legendary living composer Mason Bates. See you at the concert.